name is Joe Lombardo. I'm the LogiSYM magazine editor. And joining with me as well today is Dr. Raymon, who's the president of the Logistics Supply Chain Management Society. The topic of our webinar today is the impact of COVID-19 on logistics innovation. And I'm very pleased to introduce our guest today, who's Wolfgang Lehmacher, who is a very, very accomplished veteran in our industry. Wolfgang has held many high-level posts in his career, and more recently, he actually serves on at least 8 boards of companies around the region and even in Europe. He is also a business angel, and a business angel is a person who is not only an investor, but also an advisor, mentor, and coach to startups. And this is also a very interesting angle that he brings to our webinar. Wolfgang is also the director and head of the supply chain and transportation industries at the World Economic Forum. So we are very pleased to have you, Wolfgang. Welcome to our webinar.
It's my pleasure, Joe.
Thank you. And let's start off, Wolfgang, by asking you to maybe summarize some of your achievements in your career and basically highlighting to us what are the most important things that you have achieved.
Yeah, my pleasure. First, I have to say that I'm the former head of supply chain and transport industries of the World Economic Forum. I'm engaged with the forum for quite a long time, and I'm still part of the expert network, working with the teams in San Francisco, Geneva, New York on certain research topics. And my career, I would like to start with my times at TNT, the global integrator, now part of Federal Express, FedEx. At the beginning there, I was setting up the ground operations when TNT Skypack and IPAC merged. And after that, I worked with the European team to set up the non-system product division. And that was everything which was non-standard. I was running a joint venture with Deutsche Post at the time, where we sold express products over the counter. When I moved on to a more senior role, I took the helm at the Swiss organization, where I witnessed the takeover of TNT by KPN, which was also a historic moment in the industry, and the Dutch answer to the German involvement in DHL at the time. And from Switzerland, I moved on to Eastern Europe, Eastern Mediterranean, launched a massive expansion plan there, which changed the footprint of TNT in the region and the financial results. From there, I joined La Poste, and over a decade, I was driving their international expansion and investment strategy, the acquisition of the German origin parcel network DPD, and organizations like Main Nicholas in the UK, Masterlink in Poland, and later the investments in entities all over the world, including Middle East, Asia, China, the US, South Africa. So a very, very interesting time helping the French to improve in weight in their logistics and express parcel market. And from there, I went on joining a consultancy firm, helping companies in their investment projects, but also, for example, Chinese automotive suppliers to strengthen their position in Europe. And as you said, Joe, I worked for the World Economic Forum and have been involved in a lot of research, which is documented in a number of papers about a broad range of topics, like the responsible practices in supply chain, the circular economy and how does supply chain relate to this? 3D printing, blockchain, etc., etc.
Excellent. Wolfgang, you've been around the world, you have done a lot of interesting things, which actually begs the next question is, with the COVID disruption, clearly we are all seeing some major concerns, and your work in the past is restructuring and reintegrating and reinventing the supply chain. What are the big vulnerabilities that you now see today in supply chain management, and what in your view are the mitigating actions that we need to be aware of?
The vulnerabilities or exposures of supply chain are well known. And I would like to pick three which are currently in the public debate. And one is lean management, the other is complexity, and the third is about lack of visibility. Starting with lean management, people say that supply chain executives have pushed too hard towards cost optimization. And we all know that cost optimization means to eliminate buffers, to eliminate redundancies. And that makes, of course, supply chain less resilient. On the other hand, if you have too much of those, you may get bankrupt before the next pandemic hits. So it is a balancing act. And we have seen that companies have, in fact, well responded to the shocks in their optimized supply chain. And although they are optimized, they still carry a lot of inventories. So we have seen that when we were hit by the supply shock in China, we didn't see anything in the West. We didn't see any problem in Europe, in the US, and before that supply chain problem could arrive, we had the demand shock. So in fact, I think it's valid, but not a dramatic point. Complexity is another topic, and here it is about a high number of suppliers involved and extended over numerous tiers within a supply network. And we were able to increase suppliers from tens to hundreds to thousands because of technology and because of the ability to ensure standards far away from home. But here we have similar questions, because that is the basis for the varieties of products we buy today. That's right. The basis for also buying the cheapest thing everywhere we can. And that makes it complex, but on the other hand, it is the foundation of our economy today. And then the lack of visibility. And I think that here we need to still work on this. This is about knowing where your shipments are, knowing what your inventories are, and you can also put under visibility knowing what your suppliers are and where your suppliers are, and not only your direct suppliers, but suppliers down to the raw material providers. So when I summarize this and say these are the big vulnerabilities in the context of mitigation, I think a lot can be done with technology. And I think that it is not and should not be about rolling back what we have built in the past, but building on what we have done and move towards even more technology and what I would call lean resilience.
Right. Could I just follow up on one point there? Rolling back on what we have done, why? Do you see this as a risk? There is a tendency that we are rolling back something that we've made and made good?
Yeah, I think there is a risk, right? It's not only business pressures which are in front of the supply chain professionals, also political pressures, it's pressures from society, and the societal voice is very big. There is a media, and this is another balancing act. And therefore I make this point and say, let's be realistic and pragmatic about vulnerabilities, about what has been done. Yes, there are things to be fixed, but I think that the underlying model is a good one.
Right.
So, Wolfgang, thanks for framing that. Yeah, lean, less resilient supply chains, complexity due to a high number of suppliers, and lack of visibility. Right, where there's still a lot of work to be done. So these are things that existed pre-COVID-19, I would say, but it's brought it to the fore because of COVID-19. So as we emerge from it, what would you see the big vulnerabilities to be in supply chain management, and what are the immediate mitigation actions we should take?
You see, I mentioned that when I started to formulate the answer. There is not a new vulnerability. There are known vulnerabilities. And there are also known mitigators. Those companies that hadn't mapped their supply chains cannot short-term go through their 10,000 suppliers and understand what are their capabilities, what is their capacity, what is their financial situation. It can't just be done. The other thing is also about the visibility. Let's take that as another example. Either you have an integrated world which allows you to extract data out of the different systems and consolidate them in data lakes. Either you have the analytics or you don't have them. You will not build this overnight. It takes probably 1 to 3 years to get to something which is workable on a global scale. And what will be done is a gradual, probably diversification, because the world has become much more balanced, so giving also much more opportunities. I think about Southeast Asia. So we will see some supply chains moving towards Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, maybe Philippines, and get a more diverse and more resilient footprint. But this also comes with the rise of Southeast Asia, right? You need the ecosystems there. So supply chain is not something which you can change overnight. Supply chain have grown over decades. So it takes probably a decade to have a significant shift in the supply chain. And that means, they are robust from my perspective. And I can talk a lot about this because I've spoken to a friend recently in London. And he said, Wolfgang, I'm so surprised that we have no shortages in the supermarket. I said, why are you surprised? Supply chains are relatively robust, and it's not within the supply chain where the challenges were created. The challenges come from outside. It were governmental decisions and company decisions which created hurdles, like the cancellations of flights, which took 40% of air capacity out of the market.
Wolfgang, it's clearly the landscape is changing, and we can see whether it's real or it's perceived, but the landscapes are changing. You've talked about maybe relocating and repositioning the sources, the manufacturing, etc., and it may take a number of years. But in your view, what are the major influences that will shape this post-COVID scenario, and where do you see these paradigms coming from?
The shifts I see are in consumer behavior. I think that having been at home for quite a number of days, weeks, and months has an impact on our consumer behavior. And this will drive more to domicile deliveries. It will drive more e-commerce. So that's one area where COVID-19 will require adjustments in supply chains. Another area is what I mentioned before, which is that some countries will make offers to grasp some supply chains. So also there we will see supply chains moving to new places. I see immediate action, and Raymon, I go back to your question. There is something which will happen relatively short term, and that is the rationalization of SKUs, of stock keeping units. So there is a normal tendency or normal tension between variety, the number of parts and products you have, and the need for optimization. And usually in good times, the marketing people win and broaden the product range and the option range. But now, short term, I see a reduction of SKUs and a rationalization of supply chains. Another thing which will shape the way how supply chains are managed is planning. I believe we have seen that our planning cycles are too long. We cannot live with a 13 weeks planning cycle in a world where every week there is a new situation. So that would be my last point, Joe. Not to go too long, but I think planning will change.
So if I can just follow up on that point, you are saying that there are some fundamental paradigm shifts, rationalization versus optimization, the planning cycle, and consumer behavior. We're also seeing that there are going to be some players push out the market. Carriers will disappear, service providers disappear, and this can be a radical change in the model. What are your views on that?
This is another factor shaping supply chain, Joe, that you're bringing up, which is the change in the supplier base, whether it is supply of parts or supply of services like logistics services. The small and mid-sized segment is under pressure, and we will indeed see people disappearing. And that means that at this point, the customers have to decide, the larger ones, whom to support. And on the supplier base, there are multiple options. You can extend credit. You can buy quantities for an entire year. So, and they can then go with that contract to the bank and get financing. And they have a full order book, which is good in those days. Right. It can also be that customers enter into the capital of their suppliers.
Right.
So there are clearly options to mitigators to avoid too much strain on that side. And in fact, companies are doing this. This is not theoretical.
Okay.
A big player is only as good as their supplier base.
Absolutely.
So Wolfgang, going off on a slight tangent, we've talked about the challenges, right? And just to quickly recap, it's lean, complexity, lack of visibility. We're also seeing some organizations, I read something yesterday where Mondelez and Coca-Cola are doing SKU rationalization, right? And then we're going to shorten the planning cycle. So these are challenges. These are remedial actions that we are taking, right, as examples. But I've got a question here from a few of the participants, and it's my question as well. What are the new opportunities for us to leverage on? Yep, we've got all these problems. What are the opportunities we have?
It depends on which side you sit, right? If you are a software vendor and a tech provider, I think the new opportunities are enormous because digitization got real tailwind from my perspective, because the complexity can only be handled with technology, the visibility only with technology. And rationalization of SKUs needs analytics. Shortening planning cycles need new tools. But beyond that, I would like to touch on a point which is maybe sometimes overlooked, an opportunity for human capital, for qualified human capital, because we also had the phenomenal situation that systems were stress tests and some tools failed us. But what really held the thing together were the supply chain professionals with their relationships, with their expertise, that were calling people to ensure that they had space on a certain flight, that they knew which port to use, etc., etc. So there is an opportunity for humans. There is an opportunity as well, as I mentioned before, for countries. Countries can grasp supply chains, and in these countries, the logistics industry, for example, can benefit from this. There is, what we haven't touched upon, a big opportunity in the environmental space. So when we are talking COVID-19, many fear that a lot of the environmental actions will be put on the back burner. But I think the opposite. I believe that people had time to think about how we manage our life on the planet. And what I see at the European Union level, they are pushing for the circular economy. So for me, circular economy is in fact an upcoming revolution. If you look at the funds, the energy transformation requires in Europe, we are talking about $1 trillion. We are talking about more than 250 billion per year in addition. So there are lots of opportunities. And on elaborating quickly on the last point, there will be so much money be pumped into the economy that there is also a lot of potential for change. And I hope that we are not financing the dinosaurs, but the innovative players in the world.
Right. So on this note, Wolfgang, clearly you only touched on a few opportunities, but I can see there's a lot more we can expand on. So where is the innovation going to be in the logistics sphere, the field? What is now you see as the opportunity for innovating our industry?
We have seen that innovation in the logistics industry is slow. During my career, I observed that containerization was eating up bulk volumes. I have seen the arrival of track and trace. I have seen integrators attacking air freight forwarders and carriers. So that these are always the big innovations we talk about, the e-commerce innovation. But we have also to be realistic about the industry. The industry is an operator industry. So where the base layer of innovation is for me in the operations to optimize last mile and squeeze the last dollar out of a route. It is in optimizing your load factor on planes, on trucks. And there also a lot of tools have been brought into the business. Geointelligence to work on the last mile, just to mention one. But if we talk about what people want to see, this visible innovation, that came in fact from outside the industry. And the biggest innovation I have seen in the past was the Kiva Systems acquisition by Amazon, which in fact kicked off the warehouse automation revolution. And if we look today, where a lot of innovation is happening and a lot of digitization is exactly there. So Joe, One point is warehouse. And where I see it going forward, I see a very interesting mix, because it is a frugal industry, supply chain and logistics. So we need innovation in SaaS solutions. We need basic low-cost SaaS solutions and overlay them with intelligence. And I think there is the responsibility for the software vendors to bring in these solutions. And I think they will be true game changers going forward.
Wolfgang, one important point that I always feel is important for innovation, creativity, and moving forward is leadership. The question is, do we have the right leadership in the space, in the logistics and the supply chain space today, to make these changes, to make this jump ahead that you are envisaging moving forward?
Just to add to that, Wolfgang, especially with the evolution where we say supply chains might be moving towards Asia, do we have that capability here in Asia?
I start with the overall comment, because it is not easy, and I can't be fair to all leaders in this world. But overall, I think what is really driving innovation in an industry is not technology, although I spoke about it. It's people. So it's the imagination of people. And when we look at the leaders in the industry, they are, let's be honest to ourselves, they are more in our age class. So we are not maybe the most acquainted with the new way of working and living. So the leaders, in fact, what they need are two things. They need to have enough vision to see the next generation of supply chains. And I think to a certain extent, there are people having that. And I see this, to your question, Raymond, more in this part of the world than in the more settled West, where people, let's say, they have split the cake and they're enjoying their peace. But the second part is the more important one, and that is the leaders need to give space to the innovators. And I think that comparing on that level, the West with the region here, the Westerners are more democratic, are usually more inclusive in their leadership style, whereas traditional Asian leaders are more top-down and the key guy in the game. So there is, I think, some work to do. Hope that summarizes it.
Yes, summarizes it quite well. And I tend to agree with you, being an Asian leader, because some might be offensive. I might find your comments offensive. I don't. I agree with you totally. We've got some interesting questions now that some have asked, and you've actually touched on some of them, but just to give everyone a chance here. What are some of the technologies that you have seen to have worked and worked well, and how should they change for companies in this post-COVID-19 world?
What works well is, I think, the transition into the cloud. I believe there is a lot of focus on this side. I have been working on IoT-based solutions, which means sensors, for about a decade. 10 years ago, the devices were bulky, the price is high. I think costs have come significantly down, and the reliability of the systems have improved significantly. So I see there, I think, a good opportunity to work on the visibility I spoke before. I believe that everything which improved the picking picking and packing in warehouse, certain scanners, glasses, etc., is working. Robotics in the warehouse are working. So just to name a few.
Thanks, Wolfgang. We have a question from Sanjay. Sanjay, you're live. Shoot.
Yeah, good morning and thank you very much, Wolfgang. My name is Sanjay Desai. I'm a supply chain person based in Singapore. This is you get when you get a supply chain expert to speak. No commercial bullshit, no embellishment. Awesome, Wolfgang. Thank you. My question is two-part question and a very quick one. Would this whole situation now command a supply chain a position in the boardroom where at least risk assessment will form a major part? And unfortunately, we had to have a COVID address this. So would you attribute as a wiser wisdom across the communities, or is it a supply chain failure that we had to have a COVID address this for us?
So will we see more supply chain people in the boardroom? That's the question, yes, Sanjay?
Yes.
Okay.
And would supply chain and risk assessment be the agenda, Dr. Ray?
So first, no, thank you so much, Sanjay, for also the clear feedback. Thank you so much, and the question. And it's a wonderful question because that's the litmus test, right? When I speak about, we now understand the human factor, does that translate into more investment in human capital? When I talk about, the importance of supply chain and also the performance of supply chain, and I think that supply chain is the economy and economy is supply chain, right? Then supply chain experts need to be in the board. They were, but they were not under the title. So usually the COO is considered as the master in supply chain. But I think that there will be discussions about putting a more specialized person onto the board. And clearly, supply chain risk will get onto the risk agenda. And we know all that risk came into the boardroom about 10, 15 years ago. And the weight of supply chain analysis will clearly increase, and boards will look at that. I'm convinced about this.
Well, I like your optimism, Wolfgang. I think people have short memories. So, we can talk about it, but the minute things go back to normal, people will forget. But I hope you're right. We have a question that's a bit left field, but we're talking about parcel locker systems here in the retail supply chain, especially in the APEC setting. Considering infrastructure issues in both developed and underdeveloped economies, do you think there's a space for it or a place for it, parcel locker systems?
Yeah, when we talk about the region, we have to see where in the region. And I believe that lockers have a future. They have their place also here. And but you have to go country by country. There are infrastructure implications, but there are also social implications. Meaning, as long as families are large and people are at home, why should I go and pass by a locker? But there is always an opportunity to leapfrog, right? Maybe the locker system, which has been invented, I cannot even remember, 10, 15 years ago, is already a thing of the past. And here in Asia, we can find something which works much better and is more adapted. So my answer is maybe not very clear. I think yes, I think there could be better solutions, but the opportunity space, last mile, remains a very exciting field. And we see startups in Asia working on that. The most prominent are clearly the Grabs of this world.
Okay. One last question for you before I hand you back to Joe.
Yeah.
For a small company, Wolfgang, yeah, how do we innovate our supply chain? And of course, there's two sides to the question, right? Because you can be a manufacturer or you can be a service provider.
Okay, a manufacturer, the best way to innovate as a small manufacturer, you're a supplier to a large company, work with your large company. If you can get the large company finance your innovation strategy, that's the best thing you can get. And it is your customer. So you are in fact hitting two birds with one stone. If you are a logistics company, for example, I think being the best operator, so it is still a people business, and if you're small, it is about people, is critical. The second is find software solutions, find smart, low-cost systems that support your excellent operations. And I think there is a lot out there. So the owner of a small logistics business, one of the responsibilities is to find the best tools. And I think there is a lot of development in that space now. And these are not systems you have to buy. I think more about SaaS solutions, software as a service.
Okay.
Wolfgang, we've talked about many aspects, and obviously we've actually only touched the tip of the iceberg. But I'd like you to share with us what are the takeaways from COVID-19. Now, there are the immediate takeaways where we are talking about survival, we are talking about restructuring, we are talking about keeping our position, and we talk in the long term. Medium long term, we've talked about systems, innovation, the culture, the people, the skills, etc. But immediately now, with all the disruption going on, do you think there's going to be more of a defensive approach by people, by service providers, by customers, by smaller operators who could create some constraints and blockages to move forward?
That could be the case. I personally advocate for the opposite. This is the moment to make a leap. This is the moment to reach out. This is the moment to be outgoing, contact whoever you can contact. And what I hear from CEOs, that's what they ask their people to do. So it's the moment to act. It's not to buy the next $1 million IT system. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about now looking inside, look within, and learn about ourselves. And ourselves means not us as a company alone. It means the entire ecosystem. We find out the most of ourselves and those around us in difficult times. That's how the saying goes. And I believe that is critical now. And then take in the learnings, be open to whatever criticism, whatever ugly things we might find, and eliminate those and build on the good things. And I think the good CEOs, what they are doing is exactly this. They want to cut out the dead wood. They want to clean the house. I think that if you think about immediate post-COVID, that's it. Whatever that cleaning means, because supply chains are verticals and one company is not like the others. And I believe that COVID-19 will result in stronger companies, because the stronger will get stronger and the weakest will have to be very fast to get up to speed. And a major takeaway, and to sum it up in one word, what supply chain management needs more than ever is agility. That has to do with the SKU optimization, the shorter planning cycles, having a very good interplay and switch between machine and human, because we have seen how important the human factor is. So that would be my summary of takeaways. And it is also important to bring maybe here the government in. I spoke about the hurdles we faced, which was the closing of critical infrastructure, the closing of borders, border controls. I think that both parties, government and business, has a responsibility to align and come to the best solution for supply chains, because we all need our coffee in the morning, right? I'm a tea drinker.
Wolfgang, it's been very interesting. I think your summary of is the moment to leap out and act is very appropriate. And I also think the message to all the practitioners in the industry is the need to step up to the mark now, because the good people will survive, the weak and unengaged people will be the guys who will be cleared out. So we need a high level of engagement and a high level of expertise. Wolfgang, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. We've touched on some very interesting comments, and I hope that we can have you back another time to take this to the next level. Thank you everybody for joining us. Wish you a good day. Take care and stay safe.
Thanks a lot, Wolfgang. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks to both of you. Thanks to the audience for the great questions.